Today, we become legends.
So I made a comment a few days back saying I really hope they make a ton of major item changes for year 10, and boy did they deliver. So much that I feel a dedicated video covering all the item changes is warranted. We have new items, major reworks for existing items, and even a lot of item removals, which is crazy stuff, so let's just jump in. Okay, so first up we have a whole bunch of removed items. Celestial Legion Helm, Jade Emperor's Crown, and Tyrannical Plate Helm, the whole Imperial Helmet tree are gone. Shifters and Void Shield are both gone. The whole Enchanted Buckler tree is gone, so Anchile, Voidstone, and Stone of Foul. Good riddance, honestly, most of these items were trash and never picked up. The whole Shuriken tree is also gone, but in reality this is just Shadow Shield Shuriken that's gone since Wind Demon is moving trees and will be staying in the game. Ring of Hecate is gone, quite sad about that one actually, I did quite like that item. Book of the Dead gone as well, again I kinda like that one. Stone Cutting Sword, Blackthorn Hammer, the Sledge, Bulwark, Hide of the Urchin, Witchblade, all gone. Hide of the Nemean Lion gone, good, and finally Itchovel is also gone. That's a total of 20 tier 3 items that have been removed from the game to slim down the overall item pool and allow for some of the new cooler items to take their place. So we have an absolute metric ton of item reworks to make them more interesting. If something wasn't removed, it was probably reworked in some way. Stone of Binding is now a full tier 3 item with 40 of each protections, 250 health, and the passive now scales per level. The shields, gladiators, and berserkers are now neutral items. They have no power on them and thus can be built on magical characters now as well as physicals. The stats have been shifted around slightly, but other than that, these items are the same, just that they can now be bought on everyone. If you hated Arthur with Glad Shield, try Artio with Glad Shield. Frostbound Hammer now applies its effect on a cooldown of 10 seconds, but does it in an AoE on hit and it's slightly stronger. Runeforged Hammer gets a similar treatment where your hard CCs once every 20 seconds will create a symbol on the ground where enemies inside it take more damage rather than just the target you CC'd like before. Caduceus Shield is now Caduceus Club and builds off of the Cudgel tree, other than that is basically the same. A bunch of anti-heal items are getting new passives added on top of their original anti-heal that they're also keeping. Divine Ruin has a sharp increase in cost but now has an additional passive that chains lightning on ability hits to nearby enemies on a 20-second internal cooldown. It still keeps the anti-heal passive as I mentioned, and that anti-heal will proc on the chain lightning, allowing for some pretty crazy anti-heal spread into the backline. Brawler's Beatstick got a similar treatment with a cost increase, and getting a kill or assist on a god creates a powerful field that increases allied power in the area once per 10 seconds. Toxic Blade, similar thing, this one got some decreased base stats as well as the cost increase, but the passive brings some of those stats back, with basic attacks providing 5% attack speed and a 5% attack speed debuff to your target, stacking 4 times and lasting 5 seconds. Very similar to Itchovel, which of course was removed. Pestilence, same thing, now has a passive where enemies that damage you get even more anti-heal by 5% per stack up to 6 stacks, so if someone is constantly hitting you, this can provide up to 55% anti-heal in one item, which is pretty crazy. And finally, for the new anti-heal item passives, we have Contagion, which is when you are hit by a hard CC, you gain a damaging aura that ticks once per second for 5 seconds. Next up, Winged Blade passive now applies in an area around you instead of just to you when it procs, much more useful for supports now. Gem of Isolation Slow is now stronger but has an internal cooldown of 10 seconds, somewhat similar to the Frostbound Hammer change. Spectral Armor gets a similar treatment to Winged Blade in that part of its crit reduction now applies to nearby allies. You get 40% base crit reduction for you, but when you take a crit, you and all allies within 55 units gain 5% reduced crit damage, stacking up to 4 times. Wind Demon is now Demon Blade, as I mentioned before, and it exists on the Hidden Dagger tree. Other than that, the item is basically the same. Shield of Regrowth is now Breastplate of Regrowth and exists on the Breastplate tree, again very similar, just with shifted around stats. Lotus Crown is now Lotus Sickle and exists on the Ancient Blade tree, again very similar stats. Magi's Cloak and its tier 2 now have cooldown reduction instead of health, making them more attractive to damage dealers potentially. And finally for item reworks, Hydra's Lament and its tier 1 and tier 2 now have mana instead of MP5. Phew, that was just the reworks and removed items, we still haven't even got into the new items yet. This year is sure to shake up builds in an enormous way. First up for the new items we have Cyclopean Ring, which is replacing the removed Ring of Hecate on the ring tree. This one is medium expensive at 2600 gold with 80 magical power, 25% attack speed, 10% CDR, which is interesting on a ring, and a passive where every 10 seconds your next basic attack deals 8% of the target's max health as magical damage. The 10-second internal cooldown for this is decreased by 2 seconds for each successful basic attack on a god, so yeah, magical kin size now exist. Go wild, magical ADC mains. Tablet of Destinies is a crazy new mage item that costs 2650 gold, comes with 90 power, 150 health and 300 mana, with a passive that once per 2 seconds, damaging an enemy god with an ability grants a stack of wisdom, max of 50 stacks. Each stack makes your abilities deal 0.08% of your max mana in true damage. At 50 stacks, this is 4% of your max mana. This item looks pretty insane, especially with how strong Book of Thoth is right now, and we'll see further down the patch notes, Book of Thoth is taking no nerfs. Bladed Boomerang is a new crit item at 2600 gold, which comes with 40 power, 15% attack speed, and 20% crit. The passive is that once every 2 seconds, your next basic attack on an enemy god creates a deployable on the ground that when picked up grants movement speed and crit chance, stacking up to 3 times. This can provide 50% crit in one item when stacked up, which is pretty nuts. Shadow Drinker is a new katana that is relatively cheap given the effect. At 2300 gold, this has 50 power, 10 pen, and 7% movement speed with a passive that grants you movement speed and invisibility on killing an enemy god. This has no internal cooldown and so can snowball very quickly in fights. With it being on the katana tree, this is only available to warriors and assassins. Dawnbringer is a new hammer being added that costs 2600 gold, has 40 power, 300 health, and 20% CCR, with an Arthurian style passive that when your ultimate has finished casting, your protections and movement speed are increased by 5% for each enemy god near you for 6 seconds. Absolution builds off the talisman tree and is fairly cheap at 2250 gold with 60 magical procs, 250 health, and 10% CCR. The passive is another Arthurian style one where once your ultimate finishes casting, you pulse out a cleanse aura that provides 0.6 seconds of CC immunity to nearby allies. This could be pretty insane for supports that have quick cast time ultimates that can be used on reaction to an enemy CC on their backliner. Abyssal Stone builds off the Druid Stone tree with 40 of each protections and 300 health for 2350 gold. The passive applies minus 20% cooldown reduction to enemies hit by your abilities for 4 seconds, with an internal cooldown of 6 seconds. Yep, the Mad Lads did it. Reverse CDR you can apply to your enemies. Make sure not to cast your ultimate if the enemy has just hit you with this, or it could add upwards of 15 seconds to the cooldown. Archdruid's Fury also builds off Druid Stone and has similar stats to Abyssal with 35 of each prots, 300 health, and 15 MP5 for 2500 gold. The passive gains stacks each time you take 5% max health from enemy gods up to 6 stacks max. Your next basic attack consumes all of those stacks to deal bonus true damage based on how many stacks you had, with an internal cooldown of 15 seconds. Phalanx is a sort of spiritual successor to Tyrannical Platehelm, which I'm very hyped for since I love the idea of that item but it was just never really good. Phalanx costs 2200 gold, builds off Round Shield and has 55 physical prots, 150 health, 20 HP 5 and 10% CCR. With a passive that when you are basic attacked by an enemy god, nearby friendly minions gain a stack of attack speed and protections up to 3 stacks, max for 6 seconds. So when you're boxing enemies in lane, your wave will get significantly stronger and pose more of a threat to the enemy fighting you. Prophetic Cloak is a crazy new tank item that is somewhat of a spiritual successor to Hide of the Urchin, which was removed. At 2350 gold, this comes with 25 of each prots, 150 health and 20% CDR. The passive is once every 10 seconds when you damage an enemy god, you gain a 2 protection aura of that damage type, so hit a warrior, get physical, hit a mage, get magical, etc. Once you have reached 15 stacks of both protection types, this item evolves and grants mitigations based on your total protections. You need 400 total prots for 10% mitigation and 600 for 20%. This item is absolute insanity, by the way. It's cheap, has insane defensive stats, has an aura that's better than Sovereign Heartward combined, and provides 20% mitigations. Prepare for a tank meta with this item. Cannoneer's Cuirass builds from Glowing Emerald, costs 2250 gold and comes with 30 of each prots, 300 health and 20 HP 5. The passive is that once every 20 seconds, your next basic attack on a minion executes it and explodes it in an AoE, dealing magical damage to nearby targets and granting 25 bonus gold to your nearest ally. So that's all the major removed, reworked, and new items. We'll finish up this video with a rapid fire of more minor changes for existing items that don't constitute a rework. Archmage's Gem now deals more damage per stack. Gem of Focus has more movement speed and damage per stack, but the mitigations are removed. All 3 versions of Bluestone now deal less damage with subsequent hits on the same target. Warding Sigil and Sigil of the Old Guard now has % max health healing on taking ability hits in addition to the protections and mitigations they already had. Sundering Axe steals more health now. Animosity and Hero's Axe have been swapped around. Axe of Animosity now has the max health basic attack damage, and Heroism, which builds off of the Compassion tree, now has a backliner shield. This makes way more sense in terms of which roles actually wanted these items. War Flag now gains health and gold every minion instead of saving it every 3 minions. War Banner now has 6 GP 5 if you're the lowest gold on the team. That's it for starters, so just a few more regular item changes to go in this monumental patch. Arendite now has more power scaling on the bonus damage. Assi is now cheaper, has more power, more lifesteal, and a bit less attack speed, but no longer has penetration. The health threshold for the bonus lifesteal passive has also been increased to 50% instead of 35%, so it'll trigger more often. Atalanta's bow is now cheaper, has more power, more attack speed, and 10% pen, but no longer has lifesteal or crit. Bloodforge is cheaper and has more movement speed. Crusher is being shifted more late game with a cost increase, power and attack speed increase. The flat pen is now percent pen, and the passive damage no longer has flat damage on it but has more power scaling. It also has the same change as the bluestones, where subsequent hits on the same target will deal less damage. Dominance no longer has percent pen on the base item, but has more percent pen for basic attacks on the passive, but it's still losing 5% pen overall. However, it did gain 15% attack speed in trade. Devo's got a cost increase, thank god, probably needed more of a nerf to be honest. Emperor's Armor got a cost increase but also a buff to the passive. Mail of Renewal got a cost decrease, health increase and protection decrease. Midgardian Mail has more physical protections now. Only Hunter's Garb has less health but more mitigations on the passive. Rage now has more base crit but less per stack and one less total stack, but each stack now provides power as well. Crit chance is actually unchanged when the item is fully stacked, but it has more power now when fully stacked as well. Rod of Tahuti is cheaper, Silverbranch Bow has more power but less percent pen, Spear of the Magus now has percent pen instead of flat pen, and finally Sphinx's Baubles is cheaper and has more power. Man, that's a lot of item changes. It took a while to get through them, but if you guys appreciate the update videos, then definitely subscribe to the channel as there's more where this came from for year 10 Smite. Let me know your favourite item change in the comments down below, and I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.